you all for coming. This is a very special event that we have today. Unlike all of our regular events that we have every Saturday. So those of you who came for the first time, this is like this is the best time that you can visit Krishna House. So this is a place we call as Krishna House, and this is like an undertaking for the students, by the students, of the students. So we have NYU alumni and NYU students staying here on the top floor, and we use this place for events like this on every Saturday to unplug from the daily hustle and bustle, and to kind of try to inquire if there is something higher than the hustle and bustle that we go through the rest of the 6 days in the week, right? So thank you all for coming again. Saturday evening, you all could have been anywhere. So today we have a very special event, and we call this like a fireside chat. That's why we have this fire and we'll have a chat. So we'll have a fireside chat, and the reason this particular event this Saturday is so special is because of our speaker this evening, Rasanath Prabhu. So a brief intro. I'm sure all of you must have read his introduction in the group, but just to reiterate a little bit. So as far as his academic background goes, so he holds a bachelor's degree from IIT Bombay, and then an MBA from Cornell, and then he has worked with Deloitte, Bank of America. He has that experience with investment banking, and then he has lived in a monastery. He was a monk for 4 years, and then that's where he got inspired to start the company that he's currently working with, that he co-founded, called Upbuild. So I'm sure someone also shared a link to the website. So he has a very rich experience, and he has touched many of our lives here in very nice ways, and he guides and counsels so many families and youths in this whole process of balancing our lives towards going to what is best for us. Yes. So without further ado, and we have our special host today, that is Gaur Kumar Prabhu, Professor Ashwin Satyanarayana. So I'll introduce him as well because I see some new faces here. So he is currently the chair of the computer science department at CUNY, City University of New York, and he holds a PhD in computer science from SUNY Albany. And then actually Albany is where both of them met. So it's like for them maybe like going down the memory lane a little bit. So we are happy to have a wonderful host and a wonderful guest today.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for the kind introduction. So I'm a little nervous today because Rasanath was almost like my guru, you know, like
I like to see him nervous.
So exactly 22 years ago was when I met him for the first time, and I had very similar questions to what you all are asking me these days. Am I getting brainwashed? What is organized religion? Is this gone? What is this gone? So many things, so many thoughts were going through my mind, and he very patiently answered all the questions. You know, he really touched my heart. So thank you, Prabhu, for taking the time. I'm very, very grateful that you're here with us. So I want to start off by going to your 9th grade. When you had dreams about joining investment banking, and there also you wanted to have like a car, right? A yellow car.
Not just a car.
Not just
It was a convertible.
Convertible yellow car, and he wanted a blue motorboat. This was in 9th grade, right? Long time ago. And he was very close to fulfilling that. Very, very close. So what happened? So how did you meet devotees? I mean, this is a long thing. I think you can start wherever you want.
Yeah. Anyway, it's such a thank you. It's a very personal question. And so many things happen to make the trajectory brief, and maybe you or anybody else wants to pry into certain parts of it more, wants to do that. So yes, I did have. For me, those things were essentially the objects of having realized my ambitions. And the pleasure of owning a convertible was not that I had it, but the pleasure was actually others seeing me in it. Right. So without an audience, that would have not made any sense. But the visual in my mind was people seeing me sit in that, and then what would they think of me? So if I had achieved that look in people's eyes, that means I've made it. That was sort of the I would say the young, naive, unconscious, and yet pretty, like, it was very clear what I wanted. I would say fast forwarding from that, 2.5 years, life humbles you in many different ways, in many unexpected ways actually. And one of my first humbling moments was when, after I got through my JEE entrance exam, at IIT. IIT is a place where you can easily get a complex, and and it was hard for me. It was hard for me to see people way more brilliant than I was, and even through sheer dint of hard work, I couldn't actually excel them. They were just really, really good, and so it gave me how the notion of success in your own castle starts to collapse a little bit. And so that was the experience, and I took the experience so personally. So to me, it was basically a black and white. It was a very, I would say, 1 or 0 thing. Either I was the smartest in the room, or I was not smart at all. That was my at least subjective experience. Right? So in this case, I was not smart at all because I was surrounded by really, really smart people, and I took it very hard. So hard that I would say my first semester I spent in depression, and this is not an uncommon thing in IIT. So that sort of opened up something for me. The first time I actually questioned my own notion of success, and asking the question, well, what am I really after here? Right. So that's when I went on a search. It was a quest for finding truth, and then that's when I came across the Gita and across people who really explained it to me. The single biggest question in my mind was, one day success will be taken away from me, no matter what, either through circumstances or finally through death. And that bothered me like crazy. And so I really had to find an answer. But then, the ambitions in your life are so strong that they still keep moving you in a certain direction. So I made it eventually to Wall Street. But right before I joined my banking offer, I had my second encounter with death, which was a near-death experience. Anyone here who's gone through a near-death experience? Twice. How does it feel?
At that moment you realize it, afterwards it sort of normalizes and you forget.
Yeah, you tend to forget it, but that experience really, really, it's easy to think about, death is such a distant thing until it's close by, and we realize how fragile we are. And suddenly everything falls into perspective. And so for me, it was a very, very scary experience. I won't go into the details of the experience, but it really shook me. And so I was a student at Cornell. I was doing my MBA, right at the cusp of my banking career. And it really pushed me to think about my life much more deeply. And so, but then the only way I could make the decision was to give both those lives a chance. So I still worked on Wall Street. I lived in the Bhakti Center in the monastery for 2 years. So I had a day job, or you could say, banking. You work days and nights, essentially. So I lived in the monastery and worked in the bank for 2 years. And then I decided to become a monk full time. 4.5 years I lived in the monastery. The one thing that it definitely taught me a lot was about just the human condition. And I learned a lot about the human condition through my experiences at banking, personal experiences, and even at the monastery. The interesting thing is, you would think that in the monastery we are free of the ego. No, it's not true. I experienced my own, and I saw a lot during that time. It was very eye-opening how the human condition, how fragile our egos are, how fragile our material existence is. So what's the bigger thing here? So that was the inspiration behind what we do at Upbuild. Upbuild is a leadership development company. We work with leaders of several organizations across the board, from high-tech startups, Series A, B, C, D, all the way to IPO, and then the companies. But the whole idea is how we help leaders really become aware of their egos. That's the best way to I would say. That's that. We introduce them. We basically introduce them to their ego. Welcome. And help them stare into the eye a little more deeply, and somehow they start to build a language of awareness. And it slowly starts to help them understand, some basic elements of human interaction, relationships, empathy, compassion. But then also leads them to asking the higher questions of life. Okay, so what's the point of doing all of this, etc. So that's what we do. Sorry, long answer.
That's okay. Perfect. So when did you meet devotees for the first time?
I met the devotees for the first time in 1997. So when I was in the search, I remember February 27th, 1997. I was at home having dinner, and my mother, I was just staring into an empty plate. She said, "What are you thinking about?" And I said, "Well, I really want to know the meaning of my life." And she got worried. As an 18-year-old, and you're saying things like that. It can be pretty worrying for your parents. So she said, "Well, finish your education, get a job, get married, and everything will be, you'll see everything will be explained." And she was very well intentioned. I grew up in a very loving household. My parents, my sister, are a lot. They shaped me a lot. I'm very grateful for them. But there is a point where you see that even when your family, with all the love that they have, can't really help you understand the meaning of your own life. So 4 days after that, back in IIT, after math, we used to have these math quizzes every week. So after a math quiz, I was coming back to my dorm room, and somebody invited me for a Bhagavad Gita program. I said, "Okay, there's an opportunity." But I wanted to make sure I sat at the back, in the hopes that if I didn't like what I heard, I can, sneak away unnoticed. And unfortunately, there were only 3 people in the room. Sort of trapped. But I was amazed at what I heard. So the person who was speaking, have they ever met Radheshyam Prabhu?
No.
Chaitanya Prabhu is coming?
No, he's giving a talk to all of them on Wednesday. This coming.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am quite Rasanath.
Yeah,
You have met Radheshyam.
Karan was also met.
So Radheshyam Prabhu, if you met him, you'll actually, he's a short figure, and at that time at least, I hope this is not being recorded. But it's just, I'm just conveying my initial impressions. So it's like, he didn't have, his clothes were not ironed, definitely not, like, was crumpled. And you know how the human mind starts to form an opinion about someone, especially when you have a certain impression of how, like, your own standard of respecting somebody, right? Again, very unconscious. So my initial thing was like, well, he looks quite young. I expected somebody much older to explain this. If I have to really be there, it would be somebody older. So my initial reaction, I didn't know what, like, I was nervous. But when I heard him talk, and his talk was, it's crazy, it was about death and dying. That was the first talk. And, like, it was just, it spoke to everything that I had thought about. It was almost like somebody was in my head. It was mind blowing. I couldn't really understand what was happening with every word that came out of his mouth, and he had such a grasp on this topic. It was pretty incredible. So after the talk was over, I sat with him for 2 hours. I just cornered him in the room. I just sat with him for 2 hours and just asked him. It was basically a brain dump. And you know that feeling of like you've had a good meal? That was the intellectual feeling I had. Like, wow, this is, it's starting to make sense. There were still unanswered questions, but the pieces, I felt like there was this, okay, the pieces are starting to come together. And, I went with a sense of, for the first time in a long time, I went home with a sense of, okay, I think my questions are being answered. There was hope again.
So this is a common question that I get often. So many students here have amazing, lofty ambitions, just like how you had ambitions. And then now they're in this path also. They're starting to get on the spiritual journey, spiritual path. So how did you balance the two when you were a student? You were an IIT student, you had ambitions to come to the US and so on. You wanted to succeed, and now you're hearing about death and all these things which, and sometimes you might get forced to reduce those ambitions, right? In one sense. Because it's not good to have these ambitions, the material ambitions. That's what you're told. So how did you...
Who tells you that?
I mean, it's told to us. I don't tell them though. Do I tell you guys?
You can tell me that personally.
Have I told you? Okay,
so there is this, over the years I've really tried to make sense of this word ambition. A lot of people have a very love-hate relationship with the word ambition. Partly because of the negative connotations that it has. When somebody is ambitious, he or she is looked upon, it's looked upon as like, this person is aggressive, is materialistic, greedy. These are like the few terms that is associated with the word ambition. And in understanding the drive of ambition, I have come to understand that ambition is actually a gift of learning how to think big. When ambition is, what I would say, is unhealthy, it becomes what we call narcissistic ambition. It's all about you. But when ambition is healthy, it actually becomes about the good of the world, about the good of humanity. And you see, there was no saint in the world. I have still to come across one saint in the world that was not ambitious. Not one single one. Because when you are experiencing the highest meaning of life, Why wouldn't you want everybody in this world to experience it? Right? And we're talking about 7 billion people. Just humans. Right? And then you can extend it to other species of life too. So, to me, ambition is not. Ambition is the natural quality of the soul. It's not talked about in that way. But when it can go haywire when it's co-opted by the ego, just like anything else. And when it's co-opted by the ego, it starts to become more and more what we call narcissistic. It becomes part you. So that's where it starts to get tricky. So your question was, well, how do you balance?
How do you balance?
So the balance here, it's not about it's not about really balance. It's about actually making it healthier. And so, well, in that, if we are thinking about making it healthier, then we are starting to move the needle in the other direction. And so when we are moving from the negative quadrants to the positive quadrants, you have to go through 0 at some point. Which is where sometimes people think, oh, I shouldn't have ambitions or anything like that. But the idea here is to move the needle to go as close as possible to what is healthy, what is close to what we call the soul's real ambition. Okay. And there are various ways in which that can be done. A simple way to start is to try and learn how to be selfless a little bit in our life. So charity as an activity. So when we talk about charity, we usually think about giving money. Charity is much more than that. Charity is consciousness. Charity is how you show up in general. Are you showing up as a charitable person? And one way of cultivating what you call healthy ambition is by learning to give what we have earned, quote unquote, through our own hard work. And we feel very justified to own it. And when we give a little bit away, we feel the pinch of it. That pinch is not about that pinch is not a pinch for the soul, that's a pinch for the ego. It's like the ego wants its fix, right? And it hates the fact that it has to give away what it has cultivated through hard work. But when we learn how to do those small acts and do them just enough where we feel the pinch of the ego. Right, so sometimes you may have like a lot of money or a lot of time to give, and we won't necessarily feel the pinch. But the idea is to move the scale to a point where you're feeling the pinch. That's the point of balance. So most of you are engineers, right?
Yeah.
Most of you? Okay. So what is balance essentially? Basic physics question here. So don't overthink it.
No, equilibrium.
Equilibrium.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I can.
Yeah, exactly, equilibrium. But what does equilibrium require?
The forces adding up to thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
the forces.
everything adding.
So there have to be orthogonal forces.
Yeah.
Right? So if your life is only one directional, there is really no balance. Balance means tension. That's why we solve the old problems of pulley and stuff. Look at the tensions. The idea of tension is tension has to exist for creating balance. The idea is whether the tension is unhealthy or healthy. So the healthy tension means it creates the right kind of balance. Unhealthy tension tears apart the system. So whether we are living in it's crazy what's happening in our modern day culture. Right? We have liberals, conservatives, there's a whole spectrum in between. But the challenge is that we need those energies. We need both the liberals and the conservatives, because that creates balance. Right? But when they're not working on the healthy part, they're actually working on the unhealthy side. It tears apart a country, tears apart a community. but when they actually are working close, are in a healthy way, it actually maintains the balance in a very, very appropriate fashion. And that tension means we are going to experience some pinch, but the pinch is good. You know how when you go for a good massage, right, you feel pain, but you know, okay, this is good pain. And then, you know, when you get hurt or when you have a backache, it doesn't feel, it's still pain. Remember, it's still pain, right? But very different kind. So the healthy kind of pain is when the ego experiences a pinch in giving, which is why one of the biggest spiritual practices is what you call service. When you serve, and you serve to a point where you experience you have to serve to a point where you experience the pinch. And then, you know, then you don't get noticed for it. Or somebody didn't say how much you're doing, or somebody didn't reciprocate. And now, the way the ego reacts, that's when you know, okay, I'm now starting to strike the balance because I'm feeling a pinch and I have to deal with this. So the idea here is it's not about not having a mission, it's about making a mission. And for that we have to push the needle through the spirit of service. Giving is the best place to start.
Wonderful. So thank you. I'm just going to switch gears a little bit. So there are people coming here every Saturday, and the other Thursday also, Thursday night for the Thursday night Kirtan and so on. So they're starting to feel the pinch in terms of giving time to this, right? So they're giving time and they're also asking me questions. What if God does not exist? Who is God? What if all this is just like a brainwashing thing, you know? Like, there's nothing real about this. I mean, can you show me God? We're all scientists. Can you show me? Can you prove that God exists? What if all this doesn't exist? And what if you're just brainwashing me? And so let's talk about God a little bit. So when were you first convinced that God exists?
I'm still not. Because I wouldn't be here. I can only say I'm moving in that direction. And the reason why I say that is, again, faith is not a 1 or 0 thing. And we can talk more about faith in just a little bit. But the idea is that I deeply understand that there is a power much greater than me. Then the way I started was, well, okay, if that's true, then how do I find out? Just like you would with any subject, right? You have to get the books that talk about that subject. It's that simple. Now, here's the question, right? When we are interested, like for example, I was interested in becoming very successful career. I read a lot of books. Never was a point in time when I was reading those books did I ever think, what if this person is just brainwashing me? Why?
Because it was about you.
Right? So interestingly, what happens when I'm so interested in something, suddenly, like, the whole question of brainwashing doesn't come about. But somehow the topic of God, you know why the topic of God produces so much tension? Because it's a direct attack on my ego. And so a lot of questions come up, oh, does God really exist? You know why it's a direct attack on my ego? Well, because if there is a God, what's my place? So there are only 2 ways you go from there. You either become an enemy of God, or you try to make friendship with God. Just to be on the good side. Right? And that's usually the approach to religion only produces 2 effects. And then there are people who say, well, I'm agnostic. What does that really mean? Okay, so agnostic means like, depending on the day. It's safe zone. Yeah, we can run a very good hedge fund. So the reason why, so the question is a very genuine question. Meaning, well, what if, and anybody who is intelligent will ask the question about what they're consuming. Right? Is this, well, how do I know this is true? That's a sign of intelligence. What we have to ask ourselves is that question coming from a place of wanting to know or not wanting to know? Because that skepticism, you know what skepticism is? Skepticism is fashionable defensiveness. Now there is healthy skepticism too. But many times when you come across a cynic or a skeptic, it's essentially, I don't want to go there. That's essentially, it's very sophisticated, like I'm a skeptic. It's very cool to say that. Right? But essentially, are you really? Right? Because if I have never come across a true skeptic. Because if there is a true skeptic, that person has to be skeptical about his or her own skepticism. Which means you have to be skeptical about being skeptical about your own skepticism. So there is really no true skeptic. It's only a preference of where I put my faith in. So faith is a very paradoxical thing. You can say faith has a component of choice, which is true, but at the same time it doesn't have choice, because somehow we just inherently put faith in a lot of things. What's the proof? I don't ask. What if everything you saw on TV about the US was pure brainwashing?
Yes.
And still became. But no, we don't ask that question because it's very attractive.
We know after knowing it, after coming here. That's not true.
It's true. But we don't ask the question before.
No. That's true.
I mean, there's an inherent level of faith that we put on the sources that we're getting this information from. So, but when it comes to God, why we are so skeptical? First of all, there is reasons for it. We have seen problems because of religion. We have seen so much cheating in the name of religion. But so have we in the name of everything else. I mean, I worked for a bank. Okay, I worked from 2006 to 2008. You know what you call mortgage-backed securities. You know what led to the housing crisis in the US? Okay. I was an insider witness. It was a very historic time on Wall Street when I worked, and it's crazy. It was cheating. It was legalized cheating. And like you could, I mean, it didn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense to me. Right? But it was disguised in such a sophisticated way, and yet we had so much faith in the system. We still do have. We have so much faith in the system. Why? So why do we have such resistance to exploring the idea of God? I'm not talking about questions. I think questions are very good. But what I'm looking at is the resistance behind the questions. Why are we resisting so strongly? It's because we feel that God will interfere with our life. And that's what we don't like. And that's where the challenge arises. So the only thing I can say is come with your questions, but also ask yourself, well, am I coming from a place of healthy skepticism, or am I coming from a place of wanting to avoid? That's the first place we start. And then when you feel like, you know what, this is healthy skepticism, then you will see your questions will be answered because God wants to answer your questions. But when you're coming from the other place, God doesn't want to answer your questions. Because you don't want that. No, we don't want
So, wonderful answer again. So coming back to investment banking, I still remember the first time when you got the offer, $60,000 just for signing, right? So when you got something that you really wanted for so long, how difficult or painful was it to give it all up in 2008 and become a full-time monk where you knew that you wouldn't have any financial security and things like that? How difficult was it?
It was very difficult. It was not an easy. It was a journey. I would say again. It's not a decision that I made overnight. It was a journey, and it was a journey where I had to look at my own fears, and there were a lot of them. And I knew I would disappoint my family, which is a very big part. I did. It was also letting go of an image, or what will others think of me, all of that, and letting go of a dream of having things in life, and all of that took time. It didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of guidance from people who, I would say, played very crucial roles in being very delicate about how they encouraged me. Because when you're in that phase where you're trying to work through all of that, if somebody's too strong with you, you just go the other direction. If somebody is not also pushing you, you just stay where you are. So I had the good fortune of having at least 2-3 people in my life who know exactly how to move the needle. And their guidance was just absolutely invaluable. I wouldn't have been able to do it without their guidance and experience and wisdom, so to say. Second is that in the best way I can convey it, when your desire is sincere, you don't know how it's going to manifest. But I remember essentially praying from the bottom of my heart at our temple, standing in front of the deities and saying, Krishna, if this is the last thing I do, just quit my banking and actually give all my time and energy to serving you, so be it. I don't know how that is going to happen. I put that in your hands. And it's amazing how the universe starts to work. And so I experienced during that time very mystical things that I didn't realize I had the capacity for, where questions, doubts, they got answered. I can't explain it in any other way. They got answered from people, from experiences, from circumstances. It's crazy, I saw what happened to me. I saw what banking was all from the inside. I saw the shallowness of the world. I saw people who had a lot of money and they're so terribly unhappy. So Krishna just showed me so many things during that time. So that was another way in which I felt like my doubts were responded to, answered by.
So throughout your journey, I've seen you since for the last 20 years, but shifts started happening around 2005-06 when you started exploring self-help tools like Enneagram and so on. You want to talk a little bit about that phase? How did you get into self-help and how did that help you?
So self-help I've always been interested in psychology, let's put it that way. Right? And was just a lot of. I never really believed in self-help because self-help is a good hook because then it feeds the ego where you tell somebody you can help yourself. Right? But there is no true self-help because the person who's writing the self-help book is helping you, right? So I try to stay away from that term self-help, although I understand the connotation, the intent of it. So for me, the challenge was how I stepped into the Enneagram. Anyone here know what the Enneagram is? So the Enneagram is there are so many personality typologies. Some of you may have heard about Myers-Briggs, DISC, so many different things. The Enneagram, very broadly speaking, call it personality typology, but it's much more than that, which I'll explain in a little bit. The Enneagram is a tool, I would say it's a framework for becoming very intimately aware of our specific ego structure. How is my ego operating? And the gifts, but also the insecurities that actually come with it. So how I became interested in the Enneagram was when I was doing all of this work, going inside, really exploring myself, really wanting to give myself to. Krishna speaks about the ego in the Gita very clearly. The challenge that Arjuna is having on the battlefield of Kurukshetra is an egoic challenge. Morality is the last straw of the ego. I can save people. Or I always do the right thing. Right? Still, yes, true. It's moral, but it's still, as soon as you say, well, I'm always right, or I do the right thing, it's still egoic. The whole conversation in the Gita is Krishna actually teaching Arjuna how to surrender the ego. So for me, it was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. I don't know where to start. And so what I wanted, I really wanted to understand, okay, there's this thing called the ego, but it's so ambiguous. And it's so subtle, and I didn't know how to actually have a grasp. Where do I really... And so one of my good mentors said, I think you should look into the Enneagram. And so I read a book of the Enneagram, and I was a psychology junkie. Anyways, so you know what happens when you read a really good book? You're going to talk about it to other people as though you know everything about the subject. That's naive enthusiast. That's exactly what I did. I didn't have any understanding of the topic, but that's where I started. But over time, in really understanding the Enneagram, see, the Enneagram as a system, where it originated from, was I would say it's a mystical tradition, and the Desert Fathers, the Christians, they actually documented 9 different ways in which one consistently forgets their own identity as the soul. And they documented that they basically wrote how consistently they forget God and their own sense of self as the soul. And it landed in 9 buckets, which Ennea, the word Ennea in Greek is 9, and gram means it's a 9-pointed figure. So that is essentially what the Enneagram is. It's 9 ways. So you can say 9 ways, it's a gateway, 9 ways in which we can forget God, and if we learn how to walk through the gateway, they can actually become the 9 ways in which we can actually reconnect with God. So it really, it was not a self-help tool at all. It was actually, for me, I began to realize that this was actually a very mystical, an entire tradition that actually understood the ego very intimately. And they gave very concrete steps of how to understand your own ego structure and see those unconscious patterns that come in the way of recognizing that we are a soul. And so when I started studying it deeply and I saw my own ego, and it was extraordinarily eye-opening. Suddenly everything became just like, wow, this is so true. My entire life I've lived like this. And what is still running my decisions? Everything just became revealed. It still continues to. The Enneagram journey became for me a journey of basically peeling the layers of the ego. And I would say it's made a world of difference in terms of how I have looked to God for help. Because of the specificity of it, I also know the specific prison that I am actually caught in. And my prayers became a lot more clear. God, I know I live in this prison. And it's so hard for me to break out of it. And it starts to manifest over time in the form of when you see your own prison, you have to become humble. There is really no other option. So then humility is not a theoretical concept. It becomes very, very, very tangible.
So can we say that Enneagram will teach us what our dharma is?
Definitely. Because when you talk about dharma exists on two levels. Dharma exists on the level of the soul. So what's the meaning of the word dharma? You hear this word a lot, yes.
Innate nature.
Innate nature.
Yeah. Like heat is to fire or something like that.
Right, yeah.
Mm.
Something that's an inherent property, right? Like you can't separate it from that. Thank you. So dharma means something that's innate. So dharma exists on two levels. Dharma exists on the level of what you call the soul. The soul has a dharma. There is an innate property of the soul. You can say the dharma of the soul is to love God. That's it. It's very simple. That's why we see love is the universal language. We are all any species of life. See, dharma of the soul is to love. We see it. And then there is also the other dharma, which we call deha dharma in Sanskrit. Deha dharma means the dharma of the body and the mind, which actually includes the ego. Right. So that dharma is also important to understand, because if we don't understand the dharma, we can't align the dharma of the body and the mind to the dharma of the soul. That's why many times when we don't understand what our deha dharma is, how our nature is, how our psychology is, we actually work antithetically, unfortunately, to the direction in which our soul needs to go. So those two have to be very aligned. In fact, there are only two verses in the Gita that Krishna repeats twice. One verse is concerned with the Sanatana Dharma, the Dharma of the soul. The other verse is with the Dharma of the mind. It's their Dharma. Do you know this rule?
Manbhakto is for the soul.
Yes.
For the body.
Chapter 3 and chapter 18.
Oh, that Shreya.
Dharma. So there are two verses twice that Krishna repeats. And why the emphasis? There is no other verse that repeats in the Gita twice. Why the emphasis on these two? It's when you actually figure out these two and align them, you can make it.
So how do we align? That's the next question.
How do we align? In order to align, you have to understand. And it's not simple. So in a Gurukula system, when you actually think about how traditionally Vedic schools worked, is when a child goes to school, the responsibility of the teacher was to help the child understand what the Deha Dharma is. Right? So they teach spiritual knowledge, but they also teach, so very early on, so what we know as the caste system in India, it's actually, what it is fundamentally is identifying somebody's innate nature. And so the cancel culture started very early in India, where we said, cancel this whole thing. Like, sure enough, it gave rise to trouble. Right? I get that. But what we also did is threw the baby out with the bathwater. So now the challenge is confusion. Right? When we don't understand our own nature, even psychophysically, our own nature, we can not even live a healthy material life, what to speak of a spiritual life. The first place it begins is with understanding what my nature is. That takes time and effort. So a lot of personally the work that we do at Upbuild is actually helping with that. How do you understand your psychophysical nature? Because once you understand that, then the next question is, well, then how do I align that with the spiritual?
Wonderful. So is it possible for someone to not understand the psychophysical nature and just surrender to God, let's say,
Yes, absolutely.
and still get the whole benefit?
Absolutely.
But it's extremely difficult, is what
So that's the reason why Krishna repeats it twice in the Gita. It's because ultimately you don't need to understand your psychophysical nature if you understand your spiritual nature. But the challenge is we are identified with our psychophysical nature very deeply, very strongly. Because if we knew we are the soul, it doesn't done. It's not a necessary thing that we have to understand our psychophysical nature, but it is a very extremely helpful thing. So, like for example, if you say, do you need to go to school to make it big? Yes, no, you don't. So many examples. Zuckerberg, Bill Gates. Right? How many people become Bill Gates? How many people are Bill Gates? How many people Mark Zuckerberg? Few. It's the same thing. So a few will be able to, very handful of people without understanding their psychophysical nature or anything. But what you will also see in them is that they are bringing that from a previous life. They have already reached a certain stage of advancement that it doesn't matter to them what the psychophysical nature is. They are so oriented towards the spiritual. So Krishna in the Gita says 4 kinds of people come to me. He says people who are distressed. So the second one was people who are desirous of prospect, essentially. Third one is one who's curious. The fourth is one who is seeking the absolute. The first 3 categories of people, they actually need different degrees of understanding the psychophysical nature. Most people suffer mentally. So when you talk about distress, it's very helpful when they hear about God. But also what happens is, when their distress is removed, they leave. And they go through the same suffering again. Many times, what I've also seen in my own life is people who have taken to the spiritual path. This is actually even more tragic. People who have taken to the spiritual path, because they haven't understood their natures, at some point in time, they experience disappointments of life. And that starts to affect their faith in God. And that's where having a good understanding of why this is happening, what am I going through, what's my nature, can be exceedingly helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you. You answered my question, actually, the last part. I've seen many people in our movement who have taken to this path of spirituality, but their personal lives are actually messed up. They're fighting with their spouses and things like that, but still, they just want to keep, at the process. Surrender to God, surrender to God, surrender to God. But, eventually what happens is, I've seen that they tend to become fanatical sometimes, and that can affect themselves and others also. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a universal, this is a problem across the board, in not just in our movement, but across any religion or institution that you would see. You will see this. So, my thoughts are that there is this stage in spiritual life. Have you gone through Shraddha, Sadhusanga?
Yeah, kind of.
Not completely. Okay.
Few of
So there are 9 stages in your progress in your spiritual life. It begins with what you call initial faith, Shraddha. Then you call sadhusanga. Then it's essentially that faith gets reposed on people who have the experience of what genuine spiritual life is. Right? Then from faith in people, it goes to faith in a practice. That's called bhajana kriya. Now the 4th stage is what you call anartha nivritti. What happens is when you start the process of spiritual life, it starts to work on your ego. That's where the trouble begins. When God comes too close. So, and that is where you really see how we now use God for the sake of protecting our own ego. Oh my God. And this is very tricky terrain. I've seen a lot of that happen. When we understand, again, I'd say, when we understand our nature, we don't fall, he can save us from falling into those traps. We start blaming other people sometimes for our problems in our spiritual life. And all of that affects our practice. And I'm completely convinced that our founder, teacher, Srila Prabhupada, towards the end of his stay on earth, he started talking about really helping people understand their nature. 1975 was the first time he said, 50% of my work is done, the remaining 50% is establishing Varnashram, he said, which was really helping people understand their nature. And the reason why he said that is he saw what was happening to people who were making a commitment to their spiritual lives and saw the trouble, saw the fanaticism, saw how people left because of that. So it's a very, very big part of my guru, my teacher Rasanath Swami specifically told me that it's a very big desire of his and the desire of Srila Prabhupada that component be established so that we can really give everybody within ISKCON, within the institution, a chance to systematically make progress.
So I'll just open it up now. If anybody has any questions, please. This has been a wonderful talk already. So please ask questions, genuine questions. See where it is coming from.
Yes.
So as we talk about like finding the nature of ourselves, so what are the ways we can do that? Like,
Before you answer it, like some of us are students and most of us are students and we sort of have, you'd say, tight deadlines as of now. Like we need to hit some goals. So what's the short-term version of it and what's the long-term version?
Okay. I would say the short-term version is understanding Dharma exists on 2 levels, even on the level of the body. One level is understanding your innate nature. I'll explain that a little more. The other is based on the stage of your life. So if you're a student, there are certain things you have to do. Or there is a certain way in which it affects your life. So students, you have to study. But what you study and how you study depends on your nature. So again, some people wait for the deadlines, wait for the last moment. Suddenly they get energized and they can write a paper and it becomes like this amazing. Some of us have to like prepare, and even after submitting the paper and thinking, did I do a good job? And so we all have very different natures. So when we understand how we work and why we work that way, maybe even with our short-term goals, even within one area of life, which is student life, we can approach that in a more, from a place of greater awareness. The second thing that happens in student life is also we compare ourselves with other people, other students. And not all of us are the same. Sorry to tell you that. But we're not. So we have different natures. We have different upbringings, different conditionings. So when you become aware of your own, then what happens is it's like it starts to become a strength instead of weakness. Because you understand its limits, but you also understand its every nature has its limits and its strengths. Every nature. So when you understand that, then you know what your limits are, and you know what's amazing about understanding your limits. You learn to work within them. It is one of the biggest lessons you can learn in life, is to understand your limits and to learn how to work within them. You become so effective because of that. So, does that help?
Yeah,
Short
that
term.
definitely.
But it's just in response to your question. How do we really start understanding, discovering it? There's no easy answer. I wish I could tell you take this test. Online quiz that will tell you who you are. It doesn't happen. Because the reason for that is discovering who you are. It takes what you call cheshta. It takes effort. And what I'm wishing is somebody just tell me, no, it doesn't work that way. Now, the way I have seen this happen is through dialogue. So for someone, one of the things that we really want to do, are doing, but also want to help train other people to do, especially people who are in mentorship roles or professors or in leaders in organizations. Our desire is to actually train them to help people understand their nature. Because the only way you can do that is through a dialogue with somebody like that. And without the training, people actually prescribe the wrong things to you. You should do this, go do this, because that's the way I have done it. It doesn't work. So the best place I would say is start with a dialogue. And I'm happy to talk to you.
Yeah, that works.
Advertising. Sorry. Yes.
My question is in continuation with what you told. So, what if we get too comfortable with knowing our limits and working on our limits, that we how to so if I'm saying, okay, I know my limit, I need 4 days, always need 4 days to complete my work, regardless of whatever it is. But I need to start working on myself to improve myself, to instead of giving 4 days, I can turn it to 2 days. But how to bring up that motivation, or how to not get comfortable with the limits I have and push myself. Should I do it
Great
first
question.
of all, or if I'm doing it, how to do it?
Great
How
question.
to get the motivation?
Great question. So limitations exist in two categories. Limitations that can be improved upon, and limitations that you can marginally improve upon. And the reason why I say that is, again, there are certain limits that you can work for your entire life on, and you'll make a marginal improvement. And those limitations are limitations that are not in your nature. So for example, one thing that I realized when I was in banking, I was in consulting, I was in banking. Okay. The one thing that you realize when you're going up the ladder is they expect you to sell. I am a terrible salesperson. I can teach. So the only thing I could do was I said, I'm not going to sell, but I'm going to talk about this product. But for that, I have to really understand this product really well, and I have to be excited about it, and then I can talk about it. But I'm not going to make a pitch. I'm not going to tell this person, so when are you going to sell? It's not in my nature. Some people found that to be they say, well, you can't rise in your career, right? And it was pretty like it felt, for my ambitious nature, it was like hurtful. What I realized over time was that's true. I can't, for the life of it, I can't sell. And I see some people can sell like crazy. They don't have anything, like it's just a package, but I can go and just make a big deal out of this and people buy. Right? So that was a very clear example for me that I was very good at analysis. Like if somebody sat in front of me, I said, there are 5 ways of thinking about this. I could do that. But I could never go out and sell. And even if I had worked very hard on that, I wouldn't be able to, because it's very innate. I can't get myself to sell something to somebody. It's hard for me, right? But then there are other limitations. Like for example, one limitation for me was around punctuality. And that was, you grew up in India. That's not a lesson. So, like, one is innate, the other is reinforced by your external environment, right? So for me, that was something that I had to work on in my life, because when you come to this country, like, let's start on time. Wow, that's a but it's something that I learned, something that I then over time improved upon, genuinely. So you see the difference in the categories. So what is important again is to understand where is that limit. And what I would say is, if you're experiencing a limitation, start working on it. Right? And you will hit a place where you'll see like, okay, I'm doing everything impossible, but I'm not able to make a change. Then okay, I've optimized. So either I have to wait, or I have to take a new direction. So this is very subtle.
Yeah, but actually it makes sense in like some ways where I was thinking where my question came from. So yeah.
And so everybody here is, I can talk cricket because I'm sure everybody's watching the IPL right now. But you see how when you're batting in a certain position, and every sports person will actually tell you this, they very clearly know what their strengths are. And one of the jobs of the coach is to understand and tell the person what your natural game is. Within your natural game, how you can make some adjustments, but don't play somebody else's game. It's a very clear, that's exactly what Krishna says in the Gita. Don't play somebody else's game. Mega, then Krishna, and then Sakshi.
Mega.
So, Prabhu, what money means to you now? Like, for your company, like, yeah.
Money, the way we look at money is it's an energy, it's a resource. And for us, I can speak more personally. For us, money is a means to actually really pour more time and energy into expanding our work of uplifting human consciousness. That's it. And in the process of that, we sustain our lives. We have also very significantly talked about salary caps in our organization, where even if you're making, meaning you're doing a lot of service, we cap our salaries at a certain point, because we don't want to be doing this work because we are making more money. Because it's easy to actually lose, especially in a mission-driven organization. When you're successful, success brings with it a whole other set of issues. And in our team, this is what we do. We have very healthy debates on how is our success affecting our mission. Because when you're successful, you become more blind. So one of our conversations, constant conversations, is what are we losing sight of? And how do we reorient? So one of the biggest things that we discussed is pricing and money, and how do we look at that entirely? And the way we look at that is one is with a very informally established salary cap. We look at money as a way to expand the mission of the organization in a very intentional fashion. That's energy. The second thing that we've also established is that when money starts to affect the quality of work, we cut back.
What do you mean?
Meaning we stop making that much money. So like instead of let's say make 2 million a year, and that is basically affecting the quality of our work. We cut it down to 1.5. Let's do our work better. Let's actually really grow the team before it actually stretches us. So we have been trying to be extremely mindful with money. The third thing is we always have very healthy conversations about money. And when somebody needs a little more in their life based on their circumstance, we are always open to having those conversations. So if somebody comes and says, well, I'm having a child, or I need a little more money because my parents are getting older, I want to take care of them. We always expand the pocket, and then when that circumstance goes away, it's again reset. So we keep our conversations about money very, very intentional. My Guru Rasanath Swami, when we started up, he said the number one reason why partnerships fail is because the partners fight over money. So what he said is you have to purify your relationship with money. I carry those instructions very, very close to my heart. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
I think I'm going through this phase in my life where I'm starting to question everything that I've been doing until now. Like I used to do things a certain way. I used to be a meticulous planner, and then I had to do things like perfectly, and then most of the times that would happen, and then I would and then either I was successful, or it would lead to a burnout, and then I would be very sad about it. And then I think since I came here, and then since we had the retreat, we went to a retreat very recently, and there I saw that we planned things out to the dot, and then things didn't go things didn't go the way we wanted it to, but we still had a lot of fun. So I'm maybe there's something to not planning things as well. And then I started doing that thing where I don't plan things out and I just do it. And things are happening. I'm still my productivity rate has been the same, and then I'm actually probably less anxious.
Good.
But that has started but I've started to question whether my other thought which I've had I had this notion, and then that has been shattered that too much planning is bad now. So I'm what other things am I doing right? I've started to doubt everything that I've been doing until now. I used to be an atheist until a year ago, and then here I'm now I want to sing kirtans at Krishna House. Then I'm going through a huge change mentally. So I just want to know how do I deal with this? How do I go about this change?
The time of change is always exciting and confusing, because we are entering into unfamiliar territories. We become very familiar with a certain way of working, and suddenly now it's different. And so what it requires is you have to process what you're going through. Talk to someone who you can talk to very openly. That's why one of the things in Bhakti we always talk about is revealing your heart in confidence. Gaur Kumar is there, and always talk to him. He's one of the most approachable people. You can call him at 2 a.m. in the morning. He'll be up, very, very caring, very, very deeply thing I can say is you're in the best hands I can ever imagine. I've known them for a very long time in my life. I trust them with every cell of my body. So what I would suggest is process it. Where are you feeling like wow, it doesn't feel like like the past me. Like I'm a different person. I'm trying to make sense of all of that, and speak it out. And in the process of speaking it out, you will also start to piece what's happening for you. Take your time. You don't have to rush. Take your time. This is a very important time in your life. These transition points are very, very significant. They are not only they are not only significant for you. At some point in time in your life, maybe 5 years down the line, you will be helping somebody who's going through a similar transition. So if you don't go through this transition properly, you will not be able to. So this transition is not just important for you. Later on, when you have a family, you'll have to talk to your kids. Really help them through these confusing times, like what's happening. So you use this opportunity as a way to process your transition very, very nicely with people who have experience, and you'll be very well positioned.
Prabhuji, I got a chance to listen to your TED talk and other talks you've given, and it was uploaded on YouTube. So first of all, I was really inspired by your story. And if I get a chance, I would love to corner you for 2 hours like you've done it. But then you are a busy person, and I know you are on tight schedule. I just have 5 questions for you. But then, okay, I'll take one by one because others have to take the questions. So first question, which I feel is like, I'm going through it. So I've been practicing the whatever knowledge of spirituality I have through meditation or japa in my daily life. But because being a student of science, I know that every process has some indications or indicators that you are on the right path. If you're doing a titration, after some time the solution needs to turn pink, right? So have we tracked any formula wherein we have the milestones that to identify that we are on the right path of the spirituality and meditation? Have you done it?
Yeah. Okay. It's a great question.
Yeah.
For that, you also need to know. So titration. You put in methyl orange. Is that the right?
Skminophore and one more thing.
Yeah, but methyl orange is the indicator.
Yeah.
Right? It's not doing anything in the reaction. It's purely an indicator.
Yeah.
So you need to have a methyl orange in your life. That's something that is a clear indicator that the titration is actually taking place. So if you read the scriptures, they will actually tell you very clearly how those manifest. It's simple qualities. You will actually see a decrease in your material desires. You will see a decrease in material desires. You'll see things I was attracted to before. Doesn't seem to be. I don't miss it. Right. Strong indicator that you're going in the right direction. Sometimes we get afraid of that. Oh my God, maybe I should. Maybe I should go back to it. Right. The other way you'll actually experience it is an increase in humility. You naturally start to become more humble, less judgmental about people. It's a very strong indicator. The third thing you will see sincerity. When somebody is speaking honestly from their heart, you can gauge it. You see somebody is actually honest. The fourth thing which we all need in our lives, just like how in order to see our face, we can see all the parts of our body. But in order to see our face, what do we need? Mirror. Yes, I thought you would say cell phone. I'll take a mirror.
I don't use cell phone much.
Good. we need something. We need a mirror, something that's performing a mirroring function to look at ourselves. So that's why you have to also learn how to see yourself through the eyes of people who have walked before you. And then you can ask them, hey, do you think this is right? And they'll say, keep coming, keep coming. Right? So we need those. Other, you can't see your face without a mirror. It's impossible. So we always need that outside indicators in our life. So choose those people very wisely. It's like your own personal board of directors. Choose those people. There will be only a handful, like not even a handful, maybe one or two people sometimes. Keep them very close to you and ask them, hey, do you think I'm going in the right direction? Honestly, and you'll get the answer. Second question.
Okay. So, because you've talked about your company, and what I think your company does is like you use Vedic knowledge about your dharma and inner behavior, and you teach the corporate leaderships about their work and about their innate nature, and try to change the corporate culture, like from being really intrinsic about money to a little empathetic and sympathy, inculcating sympathy in their culture. So, is there any procedure that you follow during, like, while interacting with the leaders from Goldman Sachs, let's say? So, because I think it must be difficult for them to grasp the idea that chanting can bring a change in their world. So, what do you suggest them to do?
So Krishna in the 12th chapter of the Gita talks about 5 stages, or he talks about a 5-step path, right? Mayeva mana bhagatva, mayeva mana mayeva niveshaya nivishishyati mayeva matavudvana samshaya atachitta samadhatam shaknoshi maistiram abhyasa yogena tato mam ichcha pradhanayeka. Next one, Bhakma. Abhyasa eva asamarthosi tat karma paramo bhavan. I forgot, like, it's been a long time since I've. So from verses 8 through 12, Krishna actually talks about, well, if you can do this, do this. If you can do this, do this. So what we try to do is actually bring them to the lowest rung of the ladder. And our whole thing is geared towards bringing everybody that we touch to have them engage in some sort of spiritual service, whether through their money or through their time. And that's where their spiritual life starts. So it's and then some will go even further. Some may just stay there, which is fine, because in their next life they actually start from there. So our responsibility, the way we feel, is helping people enter that ladder. And however way in which people go as close as possible to the inner core, we move them. The idea is it's a funnel system, right? It's like most people, they just start their spiritual journeys. So like one person that was CEO of a hedge fund. I met him 5 years ago. Sold his company to Mire for $550 million. When I was coaching him, we didn't talk anything about spirituality. It was all about like culture crisis that he was going through. But through that process, he understood and discovered himself. He started asking more questions. Today, he's actually, the best way I can say it is that he is a devotee of God. He comes from a Catholic tradition. He's Spanish, comes from Spain. He's a true devotee of God. And it's, for me, it's not about making him chant Hare Krishna, but he prays every morning. Now we talk, we still continue to talk. He's writing extensively about. Now he's writing a book on religion and God for the masses, for people who are actually in the same rung as he is.
So what is the lowest rung?
What's it?
What is the lowest rung?
What's the lowest rung? Start with service. Engage people in some sort of service. some sort of spiritual service, giving a little time and a little energy. That's it. Krishna takes care of the rest.
I had a follow-up question on that. So, where exactly does like religion and spirituality meet, and what's like the distinction between them? And also, is this like a path on like spirituality through religion, or is this a path in religion through like with
Spirituality.
spirituality?
So when you talk about spirituality, what does spirituality mean? What does religion mean?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah.
So religion to me, it's more about when you're like sort of, it's more to do with God, and spirituality is just towards understanding yourself more, in a way.
Okay. So what does understanding the self actually mean? What is the self?
So it's more towards, I don't know how to explain it exactly, but it's so the way I see it is it's more of means of like meditation and other ways in which you can sort of like disconnect from the world and like materialistic things.
Okay. Well, disconnecting from the material things only brings you to a space. It's like neutral zone. But when you say the word spirituality, in the word spirituality is the word spirit. It's very simple. Spirituality helps you understand the spirit.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Very simple. The soul, the spirit, who am I? Deep down, consciousness, the essence. Right? And the only way I would say where spirituality and religion intersect very clearly is because God is spirit too.
Okay.
So you can understand the individual spirit without understanding the universal spirit. Many religions fail to understand. What happens for many religions? So spirituality has, spirituality has the word spirit in it. It also has the word ritual in it. So what happens in many religions is it becomes ritualistic. That has nothing to, sometimes has nothing to do with the spirit part. So then you don't experience spirit.
Okay.
So as soon as you say, I want to understand spirituality, it's understanding the individual spirit and the universal spirit. God is the universal spirit.
So do you have to be home by 9?
I have to be home at 9:15.
Okay.
My daughter is waiting for me.
Okay, okay.
I have one question.
Is that some?
Yeah, this is
So can we discuss?
yes, we can discuss during person. So,
Your question first. And I know you have 3 more. So
I want you.
yeah, okay.
Okay, so when we talk about Krishna and Krishna consciousness, like, is it understanding Krishna or the teachings that Krishna gave? Because when we say Krishna, what I have heard when people talk about Krishna, it's more specific to Bhagavad Gita, or is it girls, Rasleela, things like that. But Krishna lived a very long life, and throughout his life, he did so many things, and he did a very good life and very hard life as well. So when we talk about consciousness particularly, is it understanding Krishna, his whole life and what he did, or specifically the teachings,
To me, the message of a person is only as good as knowing the person.
Yeah.
So why, when you buy a book,
Mhm.
what's the first page you turn to?
Introduction.
Okay.
Yeah. The content.
About the author. Right? Why is the author so important? If it's just what if it's just what the book has everything I want to know, why is about the author important? Because it's credibility. Why should we listen to it?
So it's more about understanding the Krishna and his life. So
They are it's both. It's both, but one doesn't exist without the other. Right? So especially Krishna's instructions. So there are a lot of people who say, well, don't worry about Krishna, just take what Krishna gives.
exactly, that is
But why? Why should I do that? Right?
because Krishna lived a very long life and he did so many things in his life. And people sometimes it's Krishna is more popular with Ras Leela, but people don't understand what Ras and what Leela is. It's more okay, girls and things like. But Krishna was more than that. So that's what I'm just trying to read. So I'm also trying to understand. I don't know with the authentic resources from where I can read about Krishna and so.
Sitting right here.
It's
called Srimad Bhagavatam.
Bhagavatam.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the resources.
Yes.
Okay.
It is the only resource. It is the only resource to understand Krishna. I'm making it very, very clear. It is the only resource to understand Krishna.
I know about Bhagavatam, so but I shouldn't just
Just start really studying the Bhagavatam, and you'll understand everything about Krishna. And suddenly the message of the Gita it will affect you in a very different way. You will also see the Rasa Leela very differently afterwards.
I do understand it, but like it's way more deeper than even I thought how I understand it, because Ras particularly means nectar, and nectar is not. It's nothing like it's nothing with enjoy. It's way more deeper. Like it's not something a joyous activity. It's not like that.
Well, it can be a joyous activity.
I mean, in one way, in one essence, but I feel like I don't know how to express it, but I feel like it's way more much deeper.
Yes.
So that's what I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I would say start with the. Do you have the Krishna book?
Yeah. I have Bhagavad Gita.
The Krishna book?
No, I don't have Krishna book.
I would say start with the Krishna. The Krishna book is a very summarized, philosophically structured introduction to Krishna's life. I think it is a phenomenon. The foreword to it was, when I say the word George Harrison these days, people don't know who George Harrison is. So George Harrison, the Beatles. He was the guitarist for the Beatles. So George Harrison wrote the foreword for the book. It's a beautiful. The book actually inspired him to compose the song "My Sweet Lord," which was top of the pops for a very long time. So I would highly recommend read the Krishna book, because Prabhupada really writes the book for somebody who doesn't have any information or knowledge about Krishna, and also for people who have some knowledge about Krishna.
Exactly. I have in bits and pieces,
but that has misunderstood. There are many not full understanding.
Yeah.
Right. So that is the best exercise.
Because half knowledge is as dangerous as like not having
Perhaps
any
more.
knowledge. Exactly. So that's it.
Anyone else? Final question? Yeah, please, Vilash.
So in your TED talk, you said the decision I was trying to make, was it because of the challenges? Like I'm trying to run away from them. You living as a monk and at the same time working as a banker. So for me right now, it's like deciding the way I want to go forward. So like if I think about something, I imagine the challenges. I think these will be challenges in the way, the direction I'm going towards. Then I see a path of a much lesser resistance. Then this question comes of your innate nature, you said. Then this is coming in my head. So some sort of framework to you, when you get at that point and you have like two diverging roads and you want to take the direction, you want to go ahead.
The single biggest question I would ask. So there are a bunch of questions you can ask yourself.
Mm-hmm.
One is, what path will actually enhance your spiritual life in time? I'm not talking immediately. What path will actually help you spiritually grow? Okay. Second question you ask yourself, what are you trying to avoid? And why are you trying to avoid it? And if you try to answer these three questions, a lot will become clear for you. And then talk to someone who can give you much more sound advice. Sincerely try to answer these questions. I would encourage write an essay on each of them. It's very helpful.
It's easy if you don't have a choice in front of you. You will just sort of go ahead on the road and you follow it, but it becomes difficult when you have to make a choice.
Yeah.
Short answer.
Thank you.
Can we have a rapid fire? Any other question?
So,
What's your name?
Prateek.
Prateek.
Sorry I got late because I couldn't find this place. I went to the park and then from there I came around. So, and this is my first time I'm coming here. So my question is how does, it's a very generic question, but the question is, how does spirituality help your life? sufficient.
Yeah. The best way I can answer the question. So there's a simple way to answer the question where I would say it makes you more peaceful, makes you a more genuinely happy person. All these are cliche answers. You've heard that before too. What I would really say is spirituality is love. The reason for that is when we live our lives thinking that we are these bodies, the mind, all the ego, all the desires that the ego brings, we suffer. The only way that we actually overcome that suffering is when we understand that we are none of these things. We are actually something completely different. We are actually spirit deep down. And somehow we have identified ourselves with this matter, with the body that we see. So spirituality gives you a grounding in truth. And when you act from a place of that kind of truth and clarity, your decisions will be very different. Your choices will be very different. Your relationships will be very different. That's how spirituality works. When you think about yourself as someone that you're not, your decisions are coming from a very different place. Let's say you think you're Novak Djokovic, and you play tennis, thinking you're going to get disappointed every time. You can go to the best coach, but still you'll get disappointed every time because you're not. It's the same thing. When I misidentify myself with something that I'm not, it will inevitably bring disappointment and suffering. But spirituality grounds you clearly in who we are, the spirit, the soul. Because the word spirit, as I said earlier, means connecting with my spirit. From that place, your choices are very clear.
Because like when you exercise, you know you're getting the result, right? Like you're losing weight or whatever you're trying to achieve, you get an outcome. So you know, exercise helps you to lose weight or like to get in shape. So that's why I asked, like, but because this is spirituality is an abstract concept. Right?
It is.
It's nothing. I mean, I cannot say I'm just chanting something and I'm spiritual. That it doesn't work like that, right?
Which is why going back to what Samaksh. His question was also around, well, how do we know? I'm a scientist. How do I know I'm actually, I'm going in the right direction? Right? Or what are the milestones? What are the indicators that I'm going in the right direction? And when you follow a spiritual path, I was talking about what specific milestones you will actually experience within yourself. There are very clear milestones. Things that bothered you before. It's not that the circumstances changed. They don't have the same hold on you anymore. Things that, habits that you had that you really want to get rid of. You'll see, they'll fall by the wayside. So there are very clear, tangible benefits that you will actually get when you start working from that place. But you have to have a teacher who can actually tell you and show you. Just like if you're working out personally, people get a personal trainer, or they have a video in front of them that actually tells them, if you do this, this is what you should experience. This is keep going in this direction. So when you are in touch with someone who actually has walked the path and will tell you exactly what you will experience, and then when you follow that, you will also experience exactly the same. It's important to learn from someone who actually has walked the path. That's how you make it tangible.
So we have two options. One is to have like a 5-minute kirtan. One is to have like a rapid fire question with Rasanath. Rapid fire. Everyone? Okay. What is one thing that is essential to living a balanced life? One thing.
Tension.
Tension? First thing that comes to your mind when I say the following, organized religion.
Trouble.
Marriage.
First thing that comes to my mind when I think marriage.
Yes.
Purifying.
Competition.
Competition. A hole in the heart. That's the phrase.
Hole in the heart. Money.
Energy.
Love.
I need it badly.
Sex.
Sex. Everybody does it.
Self-help.
It's nothing like that.
If you could ask one person alive or dead, who would you ask and what would it be?
If there is one person, alive or dead,
Yeah. If you could ask one person alive or dead, who would you ask and what would it be?
okay, I would ask Srila Prabhupada. And I would ask him, what can I do to become a pure devotee?
Wow. Beautiful. Best advice you have ever received?
That's a hard one. I would say learn to heal yourself. The part of you that heals will be the strongest part of you.
Wow. If you had a day off with no commitments, what would you do spending that day?
Reading Chaitanya Charitamrita.
What is one thing that you would want people to remember you at the end of your life?
Oh. That I tried.
If you found a way to travel through time, where would you go and why?
I would go to. I desire this so deeply. I would go to.
India.
Oh, definitely. So I would go to this place called Ramakeli, where Mahaprabhu met Rupa and Sanatana. So,
What is the first thing you notice in a person? What is the first thing you notice in a person?
yeah, you can type.
Sorry. Is it more important to do what you love or love what you are doing?
I think it's both.
Both. If you could be invisible for a day, what would you do?
I would read.
One thing we don't know about you.
Paradoxical. So,
Yeah.
it's not as if you don't know. But I can say the one thing that you would not know about me is I still like to watch He-Man.
He-Man.
It's a place where I go to sometimes to unplug.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. One thing you would wish you could change about yourself.
I would say there's so many things that come to mind when you ask me that question. The one thing that I'm immediately grappling with that I want to change is not make decisions from a place of fear.
One thing you wish you could change about the world.
I wish people would listen more.
What would you consider to be your greatest achievement thus far?
My friends.
Is there a song you love and can listen to all the time?
Yes, that's a definite. So I listen to Carnatic music a lot. So there are definitely songs, but I wouldn't be able to name them because not everybody will understand. I'm giving you the context. There's one or two songs in particular that I can listen to a lot. Keep listening every day.
What is your favorite film?
The Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
That was pretty fast. Yeah, that's true.
Something you enjoy doing and wish you had more time for. Last question.
Something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy cooking.
Cooking?
Yeah, I love cooking. And I wish I had more time to do more cooking.
So let's thank Rasanath.
Thank you.
Very, very grateful.
Thank you.
This was easily the best talk that we have had in Krishna House.
That's not true.
She's saying this to everybody who
I second it.
I think, yeah, everyone will agree. Isn't this the best talk that we've had so far? Yeah.
Okay,
I
bring it
know.
on, bring it on.
Everything is better. Like for us, it's so valuable. Every talk. And this is well.
So Prasad?
Yeah.
Yes, so now that we are intellectually our tummies are filled up, now we'll fill up our actual tummies. So, Prasad, I guess, yeah. There is a lot to summarize, but yeah, you all agree it was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. So, no, I drop. Look at the plate on the plate. Satisfaction.
So nice to have you.
Yes, sir.